So let's start off formally. Today we have to talk about computer ethics. So let me go through the entire presentation, the slide set with you, and then we are going to have an interactive session later on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock. So computer ethics, what is computer ethics? Basic introduction. Ethics is a set of moral principles. Okay, so moral principles, ethical principles, almost the same thing, that govern the behavior of a group or individual. Okay, so a set of principles that are basically going to dictate how an individual or a particular group is supposed to behave. In this particular scenario, for the sake of research methodology, we can replace group or individual by a research group or a researcher. Okay, so what actually dictates the moral principles or the ethical principles in terms of carrying out research? Because we are dealing with computer science, because all of you are computer science students, so we are particularly interested in understanding what is computer ethics or what is computer research ethics. Okay, so again, computer ethics in general is a set of moral principles that regulate the use of computers. Uh, Basically, what it means is how computers are supposed to be used by individuals. So, how are we going to use computer ourselves? And when we deal with information which is in the public domain, then what do we actually need to do, or how do we need to manage that particular information that is available digitally? As researchers, when we talk about computer ethics, then a lot of things come into play. So, in this particular lecture, we are first of all going to deal with computer ethics generally. And towards the end of this particular presentation, we will specifically start discussing the role of computer ethics in terms of computer science research. Okay. So the initial part of the talk is relatively general, generic, and then we will focus specifically on computer science research ethics. What are the common issues of computer ethics? As most of you are aware, some of the common issues include intellectual property rights, which are also known as IP rights. That is, if I develop a certain piece of software or a certain piece of digital content, then do I own that property? Okay, that knowledge. Am I the owner of that knowledge, or is somebody else the owner of that particular intellectual property? What happens in university environments is, and as you go along with your thesis selection and thesis writing and research writing, if you will, there is often a question that is asked by the students, that who owns the invention that we are going to create during the course of our thesis? So the very simple answer is that in all universities, if you are using the university resource to carry out a particular type of research, even though it is part of your studies, anything that you come across, or anything that you develop that is new, that is an innovation, okay, the university owns the right to that particular innovation. The individual student does not own the rights. Okay, generally that is the principle that is followed across the world, across all of the universities. So if you are developing a new product as part of your project, then that new product is basically owned by the university. What is the premise, or what is the reason? The reason is that the university explicitly states that if you are using university resources to carry out certain types of research or any type of research, even though that is part of your studies, we basically own the rights to that piece of knowledge. So, in PhD studies specifically, in some countries, your thesis is basically kept in the university library and it is not made public for a certain amount of time depending on the university. Okay, so in my university, in University of Plymouth, when I did my PhD, they basically held on to my thesis for 6 months. So they did not make the thesis public because the intellectual property office of the university will try to see whether they can actually market that research, whether they can make some money out of that research. And if that is not possible, or if they feel that this a piece of information or knowledge is crucial for this particular subject, then after around 6 months or so, they are going to release it publicly. And the other way is that if they do not release it publicly, they are going to take your research, your innovation, they are going to give it to intellectual property office in the university, and they are going to apply for a patent for that particular piece of research or that innovation if they feel that they can make some money out of it. So that is the scope of intellectual property as far as your thesis is concerned. I'm not really sure what is going on in terms of FAST, but I think that that this particular principle is the same across all Pakistani universities as well. That if you invent something, then if you are a student of that university or if you are a faculty member of that university, the university is basically owning the rights to that innovation. Okay. So apart from that, in general computer science, you come across a lot of things which have intellectual property associated with a particular organization. Take the example of Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word belongs to Microsoft. Microsoft PowerPoint, that is also their creation, that is their invention, their piece of software. If you use it illegitimately, if you basically copy that piece of software from a CD or online, if you crack the software, if you try to generate the keys of software, which is quite common, especially in developing countries, because people do not want to pay a large amount of money for these everyday software, then that is termed as privacy, and that is something that we need to avoid. There are certain issues in addition to ethics when it comes to privacy. For example, if you copy a piece of software from somewhere, you are not really sure whether few bugs have been intentionally placed in that software if you are not buying it from the source. Okay, so those are some of the pitfalls as well, that you might be thinking that you are doing privacy and you are getting very cheap piece of software, but there might be certain issues with that software. It might be bugged, it might be using some kind of a Trojan horse or something, and normally people are not aware that they are using pirated software that has also been bugged. Okay, so these are some of the common issues around intellectual property and our use of computer applications or computer software in general. Moving on, another example that is often quoted is that it is easy to duplicate copyrighted electronic or digital content. Okay, but computer ethics would suggest that it is wrong to do so without the author's approval. If you are using Microsoft Word and you feel that Microsoft is charging a lot of money for Microsoft Word, then you can approach Microsoft and you can tell them that I am a university student, I do not have that many resources, can you do something for me? And they have a Microsoft academic program as well. So you can download Microsoft Office 365, which may cost you around $150 to $100 for as little as only $10, and then you are sure that that is legitimate piece of software. You are not breaking any law, and because you are buying it from the source, from the creator of that application, so you can be sure that it is not compromised. Okay. And secondly, while it may be possible to access someone's personal information, okay, so all of our computers hold a lot of personal information about us, our scanned copies of identity cards, our passports, sometimes even the passwords that we use for online banking and stuff like that. If we were to steal that piece of information, okay, or if we were to make that information public, then obviously that is going to have a lot of repercussions. And if we do it to ourselves, it only affects us. But if we are in charge of a web server, let's say, and a lot of people are saving their information, or if it's a file server, people are saving their storage, they are using it as a storage, they are saving a lot of files online, then we have an added responsibility of making sure that that information is not used in any inappropriate way, okay, to affect the privacy of that person. And that also comes under the umbrella of ethics. So I will give you a very simple example around this, which I tell a lot of people. When you are doing a survey, okay, or when you are collecting any piece of information from someone, and that information is to be stored online, or that information is to be stored digitally, then what you need to do is you need to make sure that you are only collecting the information that is relevant to your research or that is relevant to the application that you are developing. Do not document and do not take information which has absolutely nothing to do with the application. Common example would be, if you are developing, let's say, application that is an attendance based system. Now, in an attendance based system, what do you need? You need the roll number of the student and you need the name of the student. So, those two pieces of information you can ask for and you can store it digitally because they are directly related to your application. What you cannot do is start asking people for their date of birth. You can't ask them for their identity card number. Why? Because that piece of information is irrelevant to your application, and if you gather that information from that individual and you store it electronically yourself, then you become liable or you become responsible for the safety of that information. Some information is obviously redundant, but some information like identity card numbers or date of birth, this is highly sensitive information. So whenever you are doing your research based surveys, whenever you are developing any application or piece of software, make sure that you are only responsible for the piece of information that is relevant to your application and nothing else. Something goes wrong in future, the person whose information has been compromised is liable to take you to court, and they can basically tell you that we gave you this piece of information and you leaked it. Okay, so do not collect any information that is not needed for your projects, for your research, for your survey, or for your applications. Okay, moving on, intellectual. You would have come across this particular word quite often. So what is an intellectual? The word property, we need to discuss this before. Okay, it is generally used to mean a possession, or more specifically something to which the owner has legal rights. If I invent something, I have legal rights over it. If I invent it in the university, then the university has legal rights over it. So you might have also encountered the phrase intellectual property. Okay, so intellectual in this particular phrase or in this particular sentence basically means the knowledge surrounding that particular innovation. And quite recently, this term has become more commonplace, okay, especially over the past few years, or let's say over the past decade, especially in the context of computer ethics. So, what exactly does it refer to? Intellectual property refers to the creations of the intellect, okay, that is the name, inventions, whether they are software, whether they are pieces of hardware, whether it is an algorithm. It can be literary and artistic work as well if you start considering it outside the domain of computer science. It could be a new symbol, it could be a name, it could be images, designs used in commerce are also a part of it. Okay, so if you have some innovative design on a website, an e-commerce website or a payment website, that particular algorithm or design can also be considered as an intellectual property. Okay, this is broadly divided. Now, intellectual property is broadly divided into two branches: industrial property, which is project inventions, and copyright. Okay, this is most important, which protects literary and artistic works. Okay, so if it is industrial property, if it is an invention, usually the way forward for securing intellectual property is by applying for a patent, US Patent Office or European Union Patent Office or Asia Pacific. Okay, it basically means that I own the rights to this property, this intellectual property or invention. If anybody wants to use it, they need to pay me the royalty money. Okay, and when it comes to literary works such as research papers, research publications, okay, then the most important thing is copyright. When you search for any conference paper on, let's say, IEEE Explore, and you download it, on the bottom left of all published papers you will see that there is a copyright sign. That basically means that somebody owns the copyright for this particular research paper. So you cannot freely copy and distribute it regardless of the fact that most of the people do it. Who owns the copyright of that? If it is IEEE, then IEEE owns the copyright for that particular piece of paper. And this is explicitly stated on the IEEE website as well. Okay, so as far as your thesis is concerned, unless you invent something which is software or hardware based, which can be patented, everything else, your research papers are going to be copyrighted by some publisher, such as IEEE. Now the next thing is categorizing intellectual property. Okay, it is divided into two categories. Like I said, industrial, which includes inventions, designs, commercial names, destinations, geographic indications, so on and so forth. Okay, and then copyright, which includes literary. It can also include artistic works because we are dealing with computer science, and all of us come from a scientific background, so we are not really bothered about the artistic works such as plays, films, musical works, etc. But copyright applies to them as well. Okay, and same privacy, or let's say piracy laws apply to drawings, paintings, pictures, sculptures, even architectural designs. Okay. So moving on to copyright specifically, because this is quite important because you are going to come across this term quite frequently in your research. Copyright is a legal concept enacted by most governments. So it can be governments, but it can also be individual organizations like publishers. These give the creator of an original work exclusive rights to it, usually for a limited time. So when you publish something like a research paper, the publisher owns the copyright. Obviously, you own the copyright as well, but you delegate it to that particular publisher. Okay, so what IEEE does is it says you can have a private copy and you can share your private copy with individuals, but we are going to do the same. And in order to view your particular research papers, people are going to subscribe to IEEE Explore. They are going to pay us a certain amount of fee, and then we will give them the right to actually view or read the paper or make copies of it. Okay, and usually this is for a limited amount of time. Okay, so you would have seen on IEEE Explore some papers you have to actually pay for. They appear with a small lock next to them, a red lock, a padlock. Okay, and some of the papers they have the padlock automatically open. Common among them is all research papers that are on IEEE access, so you can readily view them without any subscription. And secondly, although they have copyright information, but the copyright information does not hinder you from actually using the actual research paper or reading the research paper. Okay, so there is a difference between subscription and copyright as well. What is the history of copyright? Copyright came about with the invention of the printing press, okay, back in the day. As a legal concept, its origins are in Britain, where from a reaction to printers' monopolies, so there used to be publisher monopolies in England at the beginning of, let's say, 18th century, so even 200 years ago. The King of England at that time was quite concerned by unregulated copying of books and passed the Licensing of the Press Act in 1662. Okay, by an act of parliament. So that is a very brief history of where copyright actually originated from. That only certain publishers are supposed to publish a copy of the book, and it's not like anybody who owns a press can start making copies. Why? Because especially for religious books, their religious books, what used to happen was that people can just put in anything in there. Okay, and it is going to be an unregulated copy, it's not going to be in its original form. So they were quite concerned about it at that point in time. So what they said was that these certain types of books, only certain publishers can publish them, not everyone. Okay, at least that is what people generally say. Okay, but as you can see that copyright has been quite important, and if somebody is passing an act around it 400 or 350 years ago, then it needs to be considered. What can a copyright protect and what it cannot? In summary, copyright laws protect intellectual property, that is the knowledge base, which includes literary works, artistic works, novels, poems, plays, films, like we explained before, drawings, paintings, photographs, and architectural designs. What does it not protect? But unlike protection of inventions, copyright law protects only the form of expression of ideas and not the ideas themselves. Okay, so this is quite important to understand, that only the expression of the idea is copyrighted. The idea itself is not copyrighted. Okay, so if I use one particular sentence in my research paper, the entire research paper is basically a combination of sentences. Okay, so that combination of sentences is copyrighted. The idea, the algorithm, okay, if somebody else develops that, okay, that is not copyrighted. Okay, so the idea cannot be copyrighted. It's only the words that you choose to express the idea, they are copyrighted. Okay, and if it is copyrighted and if you do use it, make sure that you are referencing it as well. And you also need to remember that a created work is considered protected as soon as it exists. Okay, and a public register of copyright sorry, public register of copyright protected work is not necessary. So under certain let's say legislations or under certain laws, as soon as you create something, it is automatically protected. Okay, these days I would like you to explore Creative Commons license. Okay, what is a Creative Commons license? You would have come across this term in when you are developing software or when you are writing a particular report about an application. What is Creative Commons license? Okay, so note this down as homework and try to find out what is Creative Commons license. What about the copyright on the internet? So that is what we are going to discuss next. What of the works made available to the public on the internet, and are they all protected by copyright? Once again, yes, all of these are copyrighted. Works which are made available over a communication network such as the internet. Okay, the copyright protects the original authorship. There are a few exceptions to this. Websites like Wikipedia, try checking it yourself whether Wikipedia articles are copyrighted or not. And if they are not copyrighted, what is the reason that they are not copyrighted? Okay. According to the copyright law, it does not protect ideas, like I said, procedures, systems, or methods of operation. In computer science terms, the algorithm. This means that once such an online work has been made, nothing in the copyright laws prevent others from developing another way based on similar principles. Somebody can copy your algorithm, they can modify it, they can change it, and they are perfectly within their legal rights to do it. If they refer to it or if they write a research paper, then we have another procedure called plagiarism or let's say referencing to deal with this kind of a problem. So if they are using your work, then they should at least reference it. Otherwise, it is counted as academic plagiarism. But if they do reference it, then nobody is stopping them from using it. Net etiquettes or netiquettes are about the various risks related to using the internet. So when you use the internet, because we are talking about computer ethics, it's not that everybody is going to follow these ethics. Okay, there are going to be people who are not going to, let's say, adhere to the ethics that we have set out for ourselves. So it is about using proper ways in which we use a network and determine whether the information is reliable, non-reliable, while emphasizing 4 important points given in the next slide. So have a look at the points. Real people exist behind the computers. You are dealing with people, okay, not machines, when you are looking up information online. So think twice before you click on the send button in the email or chat. Okay, is it necessary to send it to everyone? Is it necessary to hit the reply to all button? Whether you need to reply to anyone individually. Okay, so make sure that you are not crossing those boundaries. You are not the only one who is using those email services or that particular network. Other people are using it as well. So keep these people in mind when you say something on a network, even if it is let's say a group chat. Okay, so be mindful of these things. Protect your privacy. I would emphasize this highly. Always protect your privacy. Any information that is not needed should not be given to anyone, regardless of whoever he is. Just as you would in the real world, be aware of the risks. Okay, online fraud is very common, and it is very common in countries like Pakistan where there is lack of awareness. Okay, always use your common sense. If a certain is not needed, then why do you need to provide it? Obviously, there are antivirus, anti-phishing, anti-spam software as well. Make sure that you use them. Okay. Protect your personal information to keep someone from using it in an unethical way. Okay, for example, when you enter a prize contest, your name, address, and phone number may be given to a dealer of a personal information. Okay, so we all are aware of spam emails, we are aware of spam phone calls as well, where people pose as somebody else and they try to solicit some kind of information. This is particularly important in these days as well. At present, there is a pandemic going on, a lot of people are affected. Say for example, somebody calls you from a particular organization, tries to pose like he is trying to protect you, but instead what he is trying to do is gather some vital personal information, and you never know, maybe he is going to use it in future. Uh, Banks normally, whenever they communicate with you, they always tell you via email that we are never going to ask you for any personal information, specifically your PIN number. Okay, what is the reason for that? Because people fall for the trap quite often. Bank is calling me, they are asking for my PIN number, they are saying this is going to happen, that is going to happen, so I need to give them the PIN number. Okay, always be careful with this. And all of this falls within the scope of ethical use of computers. Okay. Avoid spamming others. Do not spam others. Do not send emails when they are unnecessary or not needed. Unsolicited bulk or commercial messages over the internet when sent are called as spams or spamming. It is morally bad if it is intended to destroy other people or basically not respect their privacy. So this is going to be something new for you guys as well. When you send an email to someone and they are not expecting your email, then that is considered as an invasion of their privacy. Okay, so it's not that you are going to just leak their information, or if you have some information you are going to make it public. Impolite kind of task, let's say gestures, such as sending an email to a lot of people when you clearly know that they are not supposed to receive this email, or they should not be disturbed by your email, that is also considered as an invasion of privacy. It is only good if it is of benefit to the recipient. Okay, if it is some kind of a warning or very useful information, you can go ahead and you can send it to them. Okay, moving on, helping make the network better. Okay, so the existing of information society is based on give and take. Okay, making a contribution is an essential part of being a good network user. For example, if you make a request and find the information you receive helpful, then that is considered as good network etiquette, or good computer science usage, or good computer usage rather. Okay, moving on. Software privacy. What is software privacy or piracy? Okay. Software piracy is morally bad when someone reproduces a copy of the software and sells it for their own profit. And this is quite common, especially in South Asian countries. Produce exactly the same or similar version without giving proper credit to the original author, or simply produces it and distributes it with it. There are plenty of crack softwares or cracking softwares available which generate automated keys and all that. Inevitably, this is of great consequence to the producer of that particular application. Okay, they are going to suffer financial losses. It is also immoral to copy the software if someone who has a licensed copy of the software and simply makes a backup copy of the original. Okay, that will not be considered immoral. So if you buy something, and quite often software companies allow it, you buy something from them, they are going to say yes, you are allowed to make a backup copy. That is not considered as immoral. Okay, or sometimes this is one backup copy, sometimes they allow you to download it maybe 10 times, and that is still considered okay. Okay, but the backup copy should also be only used by that particular individual, and it should not be copied further and distributed. Then you have hackers amongst us. Okay, amongst the computer science users. Creation of things such as worms, computer viruses is obviously morally bad. It is basically meant to cause harm to people. It is malicious, it is illegal, and it should not be done. Okay. There are ethical hackers as well. Okay, which basically develop a certain piece of software which is either used as a means to create further awareness amongst the masses, or it can also be used, say for example somebody has developed some particular kind of computer virus, you are also a computer virus expert, you develop another virus to counter the effect of the first virus, so that is also possible. And under certain circumstances, which we call as ethical hacking or ethical hackers, that is still allowed. Okay, then coming to plagiarism, and this is of interest to you guys, especially research students. Copying someone else's work and then passing it off as one's own, even if it is as simple as an equation that you copy from somewhere and you put it in your own research paper, and you try to claim that this is on your own work. If that particular equation was derived by someone else in some other research paper, make sure that you reference it, regardless of the fact that you may think that this is very general and there is no need to reference it. we often say that it is better to reference rather than not reference at all. So whenever you are in doubt whether something needs to be referenced or not referenced, make sure that you reference it. There is no harm in doing this. Okay. So copying programs written by other programmers, that is also considered plagiarism. Okay, it is also a breach of copyright, and it does involve a certain amount of lying, cheating, theft, and dishonesty. And we want to stay away from these as much as possible in our research. File privacy. Any computer document produced either by an individual in his private premises or in the office should remain private. Okay, no one has the right or should open any document unless authorized by the individual who created the file himself. Okay, so this applies to all of us. Ethical hacking. Now, one slide giving a little bit more detail on ethical hacking. An ethical hacker is usually employed by an organization. So it is going to be a legitimate organization. It can be a university, an academic research center, an antivirus company, who are going to trust him to attempt to penetrate networks. Okay, so sit externally or internally in the network, try to penetrate it, and use the same methods as a hacker would do, so that they can understand what are the vulnerabilities or what are the susceptible issues within this network. So think of it as auditing. Okay, auditing the network, trying to find out what are the loopholes, what are the, let's say, things that need to be taken care of, and this is perfectly legal. Okay, this is perfectly allowed. Unauthorized hacking or unauthorized access to the same information, if it is not ethical, is considered as a crime. But penetration testing or pen testing is done by the request of the owner, and the victim system or the let's say the organization which is acquiring the services of the ethical hacker wants to know what exactly is wrong with their system, their software, their processes, anything that they can use as vital information to basically improve upon that particular piece of software, or whether it is a process or whatnot. Okay, so ethical hacking within certain constraints is definitely allowed, and it is considered as a form of auditing. I don't know if you have ever come across ethical hacking or information auditing. There are certain principles that we follow, like Corbett 500, then there is Sarbanes-Oxley Act, SOX Act. These are some of the auditing tools in the information industry. Okay, when it comes to information system auditing, there is a certain rule to follow. So these are some of the schemes. In addition to that, you have ethical hackers as well, people who are very well trained in the use of using viruses or implementing some kind of Trojan horses, malicious software, malware, etc. And they can also perform penetration testing, whether it is software pen testing or whether it is something called social engineering, showing up in a particular organization, trying to pose as an employee of the organization, going through their processes, checking how strong their physical security is, what kind of access control mechanisms are being used. All of that is considered legal if that particular organization is hiring the services of the ethical hacker. There are few industrial certifications available for ethical hacking. So GIAC is one. GIAC is an organization which trains people in ethical hacking. So you can look it up online in your own term, and whether that is of any interest to you. There are other general security qualifications as well, like CISP. Then Cisco also has a particular stream of security related stuff. So yes, whenever you apply for a job as an ethical hacker, or generally all of the ethical hackers have some kind of industry credential associated with them. So just to conclude this first part of the session, okay, which is that as technology advances, computers are continuing to have or will continue to have a greater impact on all of our lives. Okay, so computer ethics basically promotes the discussion of how much influence computers should have in multiple different areas, from artificial intelligence to machine learning to human communication. And as this knowledge, or as the computer tools evolve further, Computer ethics needs to be discussed continuously. Okay, we need to create ethical standards, and we need to address some of the issues that are raised by these associated technologies. Just to give you an example to conclude this session, in Pakistan, there was initially there was no law which was preventing cyber crimes, and this was back in the day, maybe 15 years ago. And slowly, our governments started developing cyber security laws. So we started off with a basic act, a cyber security act, an act of parliament, which basically illegal made hacking and all of this illegal. And now we have a comprehensive law since 2016 which deals with a multitude of problems related to computers, including hacking, including spamming, misinformation, disinformation, online harassment, and all of this. And we have an organization, FIA. FIA has the Federal Investigation Agency. They have a cyber crime wing. They have offices in Lahore as well as having an online portal. If you are experiencing any type of online harassment, or if you are facing any type of cyber crime, you can report it to them using their online portal, and they try their best to basically catch the culprits. And there are strict laws within Pakistan to deal with the menace of online crime. Okay, so there is a certain legislation which has already been passed in 2016. It is very, very comprehensive. It even details what are the penalties for certain offenses. So say for example, if you damage some online infrastructure, if it is a private organization, the prison sentence for that I think is around 5 years. If it is a national infrastructure, something that is of significance to the government, if you try touching that online or if you cause any issues to it, then I think the penalty can be as severe as up to a maximum of 20 years. So all of that is very well documented now. Okay, so that concludes the first part of the session. Thank you very much for listening. Now moving on to the second part of this particular session, and this is purely about ethics in computer science research. Some of the reflective points that I have jotted down for discussion are that whether primary ethical concerns that everyone aware of, such as plagiarism and cheating, this is common across all disciplines, and we know that this actually exists. But how do we actually measure it? Okay, so what is the use of pirated software in research studies? How many of us are actually using pirated software in our everyday life? Okay, what do we mean by vaguely stated hypothesis? What are fabricated results? You do not get the accuracy that you want. You simply fabricate that accuracy and you put it in a research paper. What are the repercussions? What are the conclusions to all of this? Okay, and most importantly, when you are carrying out survey based research or any computer science research that involves humans, what is the risk to those individuals as part of this research? So these are the aspects which are not so popular, and these are the aspects which you need to basically focus on in your everyday research, in addition to plagiarism and cheating. Plagiarism and cheating is very common, but some of these other issues are equally important, but they are not given due consideration. Okay. Moving on, your researcher views on ethical research. Hall and Flynn, this paper, I have mentioned it at the bottom, conducted a survey to investigate the awareness of research ethics among academic computer science and SE, software engineering researchers in the United Kingdom. So out of the 44 people who were given the survey, only 16 considered monitoring the ethical consideration of software engineering to be very important. Other people said it is not important. Some of the surprising comments that came from these researchers were, I find this questionnaire very worrying because the idea of having to seek ethical approval threatens academic freedom. And I believe you have done one particular assignment on this as well. Okay, I will discuss it towards the end of this lecture, the assignment. But let's look at the second comment. Seeking ethical approval has never arisen, and I don't know what this is, why this is an issue. So one of the researchers is basically saying that I have never had the need of ethical approval. No one is responsible for the ethical approval of CS research. Very, very surprising comments. This is, by the way, the actual research paper by Hall and Flynn. Then what is responsible research conduct? Computer scientists experimenting with software systems must also be aware that they are observing a fundamentally deterministic system, okay, a system that has been created by humans and that is supposed to run within a certain execution environment. Now, while computer systems and the environment may be highly complex, they remain systems that are created by us. They are not naturally occurring phenomena. We develop computer systems, we design the hardware, the software, okay? They are not naturally occurring. So, researchers must take care to avoid or account for biases that often exist in these constructs. An example that I give is same machine learning algorithm from different software vendors or from different tools may give different results on the same test data. Okay, so you use a clustering algorithm on MATLAB that gives you maybe 7 different clusters for that particular data using the same seed. Okay, for clustering you use RStudio, same data set may give you around 10 different clusters. So that is the difference. Then when it comes to prediction, if you are buying prediction software from a particular company, it is also quite likely that they have biased their machine learning algorithms to produce certain types of results and only take you in the direction of predicting certain values, which may be of benefit to them or which may be of benefit to some other company. Okay, so you need to understand these biases which can be incorporated in these computer systems which are developed by us. Okay, then recording and documenting research. Ability to duplicate the work of other researchers is highly important. You publish a research paper, include all the sufficient details in it so that whenever somebody wants to carry out the same experiment, they can go ahead and they can carry out the experiment and they can validate your results. Okay, we call this reproducible research, and this is going to be the topic of our next lecture. Okay, now I've written over here that it's time for today's assignment. So in the interactive session, we are going to look at the assignment which we have already completed, and we are going to discuss some of these points in much more detail. Okay, so I would expect that most of you would have gone through this lecture prior to actually our discussion tomorrow morning. Okay, so thank you very much, and I will speak to all of you tomorrow morning.